Under the biting winter of Duluth, Minnesota, everyone told her not to buy that condemned lakeside cabin, especially in her condition. 7 months pregnant, broke, and out of options, she still signed the papers. She only wanted a quiet place to breathe, to survive, to bring her baby into the world. But on the first night when her German shepherd froze and began growling at the rotting floorboards near the fireplace, she realized this place wasn't abandoned by accident. There was a hidden space beneath the cabin sealed for decades. And what she found under that frozen wood would tear open the oldest wound in this city, expose a truth that powerful men buried under ice and fear, and change the destiny of her unborn child forever. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Comment your city, state, or country below. Let's see how far this winter secret travels. Snow swirled like white smoke off Lake Superior, the wind screaming against the iron ribs of the aerial lift bridge. Emily stood there in it, face burning from cold and fear. She was 7 months pregnant, belly round, and taut beneath an old wool coat that no longer zipped properly. She was 29, with pale skin that always looked a little pink in winter wind, light brown hair tucked inside a knit beanie, and hazel eyes that were always a little tired, a little worried, like she was bracing for the next blow before it even arrived. She was alone, but she wasn't alone. Walking at her left knee, always slightly ahead like a shield, was Ranger, a 5-year-old male German shepherd, large and athletic, black and tan, fur thick like a winter pelt, ears always alert, amber eyes that never blinked when he scanned strangers. He had been trained by his previous owner, an older veteran who'd died in his sleep 2 years ago, leaving no one behind but this dog. Ranger was disciplined, fiercely loyal, and hated men who walked too close to Emily, like he was born understanding women's fear. Emily kept one hand on her belly and one hand shoved in her pocket, holding her last $20 bill. She hated how symbolic that was. She used to have savings, a career, a plan. She used to believe in the future as if it were an open field. Then she fell in love with a man who spoke like a poet about forever, and then one Tuesday morning he simply packed a duffel bag and left her pregnant in the middle of their half-painted new nursery. His name was Adam. He was tall, square-jawed, charming, with a smile that fooled everyone, her parents, her friends, even the barista who used to slip him extra espresso shots. He had never raised a hand at her. He had never yelled. His cruelty was a softer kind disappearing. Slipping out of the world like smoke, like he had never belonged to it in the first place. And now she was here, Duluth, Minnesota. Lake Superior, frozen like a graveyard of glass. Living inside a tiny rented attic above a bait shop owned by a man who barely noticed her existence. She needed more money this week, or she would be on the street by next Monday. Ranger paused at the entrance of the bait shop, nose down, tail stiff. He pawed at something under the snow. Emily sighed. "What now, buddy?" She crouched slowly because bending with a 7-month belly felt like trying to fold a beach ball, and brushed away the snow. A small brass key lay there, dull with age, engraved with 3 letters PLB. She snorted. "If this is Treasure Kid Doe gets milk, Mama pays the electric bill." She said it out loud because it helped break the silence. In truth, her chest tightened every time she joked like that, like life might be listening, preparing to punish her for having hope. Emily pushed open the bait shop door. Bells jingled overhead. The shop smelled like lake water, rubber boots, and old coffee. Behind the counter was Gary, the owner, a man in his late 50s, heavy-set broad shoulders and a beard, gone too gray too fast. His skin was red and thick, like someone who spent his entire life in cold wind. Gary rarely smiled, rarely spoke. He lost his son to the war in Afghanistan 12 years ago and never came back from that grief. He wasn't cruel, just hollow, like someone who'd been scooped out inside and was functioning only through habit. Gary looked at her and nodded once. That was all the greeting she got. "You get the dock inventory typed up yet?" he asked, voice gravelly. I'll have it to you before noon, she answered. Gary grunted. He wasn't a bad man, he just didn't want to care again. Caring was expensive. Ranger sat beside Emily like a statue. Gary tossed the dog a peanut butter treat without looking, and Ranger caught it mid-air. Gary didn't allow many things in his shop, but allowed Ranger because he said Ranger felt like a dog that understands. Emily pulled out her tiny cracked phone from her coat pocket. The rent reminder email glowed like a threat. Due in 6 days. She bit her lip until she tasted metal. She typed inventory for 2 hours and got paid $20 in cash. $20. The weight of the world for the price of one grocery run. She stepped back out into the cold afternoon, and the lake wind slapped her face. Ranger nudged her hand as if asking what the plan was. The plan. We survive one more day, she whispered. She had nowhere to be but the small attic where space heaters whined like dying insects. She started walking toward it when a sudden gust made her stop. Ranger's ears pricked. His tail stiffened again. He looked toward the abandoned cabin across the frozen bike path. Emily had seen that place before. It used to be a small fishing lodge decades ago. The current owner defaulted taxes. The city posted auction signs 3 weeks ago, but no one wanted it. Rumors said weird things happened there. Teens disappeared once in the 90s. Or that was the rumor Gary once muttered half-drunk. But this winter nobody talked about it. They only said, don't go near it. Ranger took a step toward it. Emily grabbed his collar. We don't have time for ghost stories, she said. But her voice cracked. Her eyes drifted back toward the roofline of that cabin. The windows were boarded, yet one of the planks wasn't straight, like someone had pried it recently. Her breath hitched. Ranger growled low in his chest, protective, warning, or calling her attention to something. Emily forced herself to walk away. She took 20 slow steps. The wind howled behind her, and in that wind she thought she heard a sound she couldn't name. Not wind, not water. A hollow knocking carried across ice. She turned back once more. Ranger was staring dead at the cabin. Emily felt her baby shift, like the little heart beating inside her was trying to turn toward that direction, too. She told herself she wasn't superstitious. She told herself ghosts don't exist. She told herself her trauma didn't make her imagine voices in the wind. But she also told herself if she kept living exactly like this, Broken Visible scared her child would be born into despair. Her hand closed around the brass key in her coat pocket. PLB. Why did Ranger find this why her, why now? Her pulse thrummed not like fear, but like destiny. She whispered to Ranger, barely audible, maybe this is the last door. Or the first. Ranger whined softly in agreement. She didn't know yet that this tiny key would unlock the one truth her entire town had tried to bury under ice and silence for 50 years. But she would soon. Because sometimes the universe gives you one last chance. And sometimes the wind carries the voices of those buried beneath it. And Emily, pregnant, broke, and on the edge of hope was finally willing to listen. Emily returned to the foot of the aerial lift bridge near dusk, the lake wind slashing her face raw. The temperature had dropped again, wind chill cutting like tiny needles straight through her coat. She held the brass key in her glove and stared at the old storage cabinet set against the concrete support beams of the bridge. Most passers-by never noticed it because it just looked like an old, rusted port file locker, the kind harbor workers stored broken tow ropes in. Ranger pressed close to Emily's legs, his breath steaming out in heavy bursts, ears pricked, body tense in that signature German shepherd posture, his stance when he sensed the world was about to show its teeth. Emily's hands shook as she fitted the key into the lock. Her stomach contracted not from pain, but from that mix of terror and hope that always arrived when something irreversible was about to happen. The lock clicked. The cabinet door creaked open and the smell hit her salt, mildew, old, paper-rusted metal. She gagged. The space inside held old manila files, envelopes tied with twine, and 2 small tapes with dates handwritten in pencil. Emily reached in and pulled out an envelope. The letters inside were dated 1969, the handwriting elegant, romantic, the ink slightly bled from moisture. She read the names: Jack Matson, Evelyn Crow. Emily immediately imagined them. Jack, described in one photo stuck inside the envelope, was a young dock worker in his 20s, lean and tall, dark hair, slicked back, square-jawed, wearing a navy pea coat, eyes filled with a kind of shy humor. Evelyn Crow was a nurse. A photograph from a Christmas party showed her a tall woman with auburn hair pinned in curls, soft lashes, and a gentle smile. The kind of person who carried warmth the way others carried weapons. The letters described a love story between a dock worker and a nurse in the hardest winter Duluth had seen in years, and inside these perfectly worded paragraphs was fear. They mentioned an accident on the bridge where Jack saved another man, and Jack mysteriously disappeared after that night. Another letter hinted that someone powerful had ordered the official report changed. Beneath the stack, Ranger nudged Emily's hand with his snout. He clawed at a small metal box wedged in the back corner of the cabinet. Emily pulled it out. The box was heavy for its size. She flipped the latch. Inside lay a pendant silver with 2 letters carved delicately and lovingly into it: J.E., Rose, and Evelyn. Emily felt her baby move a twisting, like the child inside her had just felt the weight of this heartbreak frozen in time. Her eyes blurred with tears. Ranger growled low. Emily jerked her gaze to the side. A man had appeared at the far end of the underbridge walkway. He wasn't close enough to hear them, but clearly close enough to see what she was doing. He wasn't someone from the bait shop or the docks. He was neatly dressed for Duluth winter, wearing a wool charcoal coat, tailored to him black gloves, black beanie posture, stiff face, sharp like someone carved out of cold clay. He looked mid-50s, tall, slender, with narrow shoulders and long legs. His face was pale, with a trimmed silver mustache and goatee, and eyes the color of pewter, emotionless but scanning everything with cold efficiency. He was not a tourist. He was someone used to watching. Ranger stepped partly in front of Emily Hackles, risen tail stiff and level. Emily swallowed and placed the pendant back in the box. The man stepped closer, but then a group of teenagers on bikes passed between them laughing, and he pivoted, casually hands in pockets, before turning back up toward Canal Park and disappearing around the corner. Emily didn't breathe for several seconds. Duluth was small. Everyone knew everything. So if that man knew anything about the cabinet, this was bigger than old love letters. Emily shoved the file's pendant tapes into her tote bag, locked the cabinet again, and hurried back across the icy walkway, Ranger practically gliding ahead of her like a 4-legged bodyguard. When she got home to her rented attic, she shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and placed a chair beneath the knob. She plugged in the cheap space heater and sat at the small kitchen table. The attic was tiny, barely room for her futon mattress, a dresser, a tiny kitchenette with a 2-burner stove. The ceiling slanted sharply. She always had to stoop near the window. The baby kicked hard like it sensed her adrenaline. Emily whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm trying." She pulled out the letters again. Her chest tightened with something like recognition. She saw herself in Evelyn, the woman trying to hold love together in a freezing city that didn't care if you drowned. She saw Adam in Jack, except Jack didn't run. Jack disappeared because men with power decided the truth was inconvenient. Ranger placed his head on Emily's knee, eyes raised anxiously toward her face, sensing her spiraling thoughts. Emily stroked his fur. "You good boy," she whispered. But her hand shook. Someone had removed this evidence from the world and buried it like a bone underneath the cold steel ribs of the bridge. Someone had wanted Jack to disappear. Someone had wanted Evelyn to grieve quietly. Someone had wanted Duluth's Autaris proud history to look clean. Emily pulled out the tapes. She didn't have a tape player, but remembered that Gary had one in the back office of the bait shop. she would need to ask him tomorrow. Ranger suddenly leapt to his feet and barked once, sharp loud like a warning gunshot. Emily flinched and turned toward the narrow window that faced the street. Outside, a black SUV turned the corner slowly. Its headlights swept across the snow across her window, and then it stopped beneath the street lamp. The engine idled. No one got out. Emily crouched and pulled the curtain. Ranger growled. The SUV stayed there for nearly a full minute, then drove off into the dark. Emily's heart pounded so loud she could hear it echo against her ribs. This was not just history. Someone alive today still cared if these old files stayed hidden. Someone alive today still feared what truth might rise out of the ice. Emily sat back at her table, fingertips pressing against the pendant's cold silver. She whispered into the dim little attic voice, small and trembling, "Why now? Why me?" And inside her belly, her baby kicked back as if answering, "You were the one who found it." The next morning, the sky was a flat metal sheet bright with winter glare, the kind that made Lake Superior look less like water and more like an open blade. Emily tightened her scarf and walked toward the bus stop with Ranger at her side. She had barely slept. The pendant, the letters, the tapes her mind wouldn't stop replaying them. She had looked up the return address printed on the oldest envelope. Duluth Heights Nursing and Memory Care. She didn't know yet if the Evelyn in the letters was still alive, but the idea that she might be the idea that truth might still be found inside a living person felt like a moral call, the kind that shook her right down to bone. The bus smelled like wet wool and exhaust. Sitting near the back was a woman in her early 60s, sharp, thin face, black eyebrows tattooed on lips, dark red with lipstick hair dyed jet black. But that scene didn't matter to Emily. All she could think of was the pendant burning a ghost-shaped weight in her pocket. Emily's belly pressed against the bus rail as she steadied herself, 7 months pregnant, spine aching from the cold. Ranger lay down at her feet, front paws crossed, eyes scanning every movement like a soldier on duty. At the nursing home, the receptionist, a chubby young man in his 20s named Grant, had short blonde hair, pimples across his jawline, and a kind but distracted face. When Emily said she was looking for one particular resident, he tapped the list and said, "Evelyn Carter, room 212. She's one of the old originals here. Sharp memory. Sweet. Can't sleep when it snows. Says snow sounds like ghosts of the lake." Grant gave a shy smile, then lowered his voice. She loves visitors. Emily walked down the hallway, feeling her pulse in her throat. When she pushed the door of room 212, she saw her. Evelyn Carter sat near the window in a rocking chair wrapped in a pale yellow cardigan. She was around 80, maybe older, her silver hair thin as spiderweb threads. Her skin was translucent with a network of delicate blue veins beneath. But her eyes had the piercing brightness of someone who never surrendered her internal flame. Evelyn looked up and smiled softly, almost knowingly, when Emily entered. Emily introduced herself, gently explained she had found some old letters. When she reached into her coat and placed the pendant into Evelyn's hand, the old woman's fingertips trembled. Even Ranger, who usually scanned aggressively, sat quietly and lowered his head to the floor as if recognizing sacred territory. Evelyn's lower lip trembled. "I gave him that," she whispered. Her voice was fragile like old paper, Jack. Christmas Eve 69. The world inside Emily stopped. Emily sat across from her hands, resting over her belly as if shielding the baby from the weight of someone else's lifetime of grief. Evelyn began talking without being asked. She spoke slowly but clearly, as if she had stored the words in perfect order for 50 years, waiting for a listener worthy of them. She and Jack were planning to leave Duluth and start a small clinic up north where they would help fishermen and their families. She was a nurse and he had worked the docks, but she always said Jack had the heart of a pastor and the patience of a mathematician. That winter there had been a massive scandal, brewing shipments, damaged workers getting hurt, supervisors hiding paperwork, council members were cleaning incident reports for money. Jack had found proof. He had photos. He had names. And he told her he was going to take it to the union head even if it cost him his job. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She wasn't a woman who cried easily anymore. She just clutched the pendant. He never came home that night, and nobody cared. They said he slipped into the lake. But I know the difference between falling and being pushed. Emily felt her baby kick. A little foot maybe, or a fist, or a warning. Ranger suddenly stood up, ears-pointed tail stiffened. He stared toward the window facing the facility driveway. Emily got up and looked through the blinds. A black SUV had pulled into the driveway. She recognized the curve of the hood, the tinted windows, the same shape as the one outside her street the night before. Emily's breath stuttered. She stepped into the hallway with Ranger leading. The SUV door opened. A man stepped out, not the older observer from before, but a different man. Mid-40s, broad shoulders, clean-shaven, dark hair slicked back with expensive product, wearing a navy blue cashmere coat that fitted so perfectly he probably had it tailored in Chicago or New York. His face was handsome, but his eyes were dead, a man's eyes when he had turned off all the lights inside his own soul a long time ago. He smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. He approached like they knew each other already. Miss Emily Barton. His voice was pleasant, smooth, expensive. Emily instantly lied on instinct. Nope, wrong person. He smiled wider. Oh, I think you're exactly the right person. He opened his coat slightly and slid out a thick envelope. I'm here on behalf of a private collector of historical documents. I believe you came into possession of some items belonging to our collection. We would like them back, and we are prepared to be very generous for your cooperation. Emily froze. Ranger didn't. Ranger launched like a bullet, leapt and ripped off the man's leather glove in one clean bite and sprinted back up the walkway in a loop tail high like a banner teasing mocking, refusing to give it back. The man didn't flinch, but his eyes changed. Something cold flickered at the edges. He reached slowly into his pocket and took out another glove like the gesture was scripted. Your dog is spirited. Emily tightened her scarf. My dog doesn't take cash. Sorry. Emily pivoted back inside before he could follow and shut the door behind her. She locked it. Her hands were trembling, but her mind had never been clearer. She walked straight back to Evelyn's room. There was only one right way to respect the dead and the living, who waited 50 years to see justice. Emily took out her phone. She snapped photos of every document. She scanned pages with a free PDF app. She uploaded copies to encrypted cloud storage. She then walked to St. Mary's Church near the harbor and handed Father Macmillan, an older priest with white hair and watery blue eyes, copies sealed in an envelope to be opened only if anything happens to me. He looked confused, but agreed. Priests in Duluth see everything eventually. Then Emily went to the Duluth Journal and slipped an envelope into the mail slot for a reporter she'd Googled, Lauren Brewer, known for exposing municipal embezzlement last year. And finally, as snow began to fall again and the city lights flicked on like gold in the freezing night salt air, Emily returned to the nursing home and gave the original pendant, the original letters, and the original tapes to Evelyn. I think Jack would want you to hold them again, Emily said, voice low. Evelyn closed her eyes and pressed the pendant to her heart. I can die now, she whispered. Someone finally remembered us. Emily stepped outside again. Ranger padded beside her. The snow fell thick and heavy. The truth was no longer buried under ice. It was breaking like spring melt. Emily knew now that whatever force was pushing her into this was bigger than fear. It was destiny, and it had chosen her. That night, the temperature plunged so violently it felt like the sky itself had pulled a knife. Snow blasted Canal Park, sideways thick, blinding, angry, like winter had decided to test the bone of every living creature still walking. Emily fought the wind, step by step, her coat whipping open and her 7-month belly exposed in flashes of freezing air, teeth clenched so hard she could taste metal on her tongue, while Ranger leaned against her leg like a moving brace, his weight anchoring her to the sidewalk so she wouldn't blow off the earth entirely. She wasn't going back to the attic. Not yet. She needed to take a different route because the sidewalks had become nearly impassable. She was halfway across the canal footpath when Ranger snarled at empty air, then yanked her toward the underside of the aerial lift bridge toward a strip of concrete hidden from the main pedestrian trail near where dockworkers sometimes stored temporary gear. Emily stumbled and yelled, but Ranger wouldn't budge. He pulled harder and she had no choice but to follow him. When she reached the bottom of the embankment, she saw a shape curled beneath the metal ladder leading up the substructure of the bridge. A human, half buried in a drift of snow that was blowing in fast. Emily slid awkwardly down the icy slope, gripping Ranger's collar for balance. The figure was an older man, maybe mid-60s. His beard was white and patchy, his cheeks hollow like someone who had lived too many years outdoors. His hair was shoulder-length and tangled into rope-like strands. He wore a dirty green military field jacket from the Vietnam-era patches missing dirt frozen into the fabric. He was a veteran. Emily recognized the shape of that jacket like an artifact. She gently touched his shoulder. He groaned, but didn't open his eyes. Ranger nosed his cheek, sniffing intently. Emily dialed 911, her fingers numb. She shouted into the phone against the wind. "There's a man trapped under the bridge. He's freezing to death." The operator asked for an exact location. Emily explained between chattering teeth. "Under the bridge, toward the Duluth side, near the ladder." She hung up heart-hammering and kneeled beside the old veteran, slipping off her coat and wrapping it around his torso, even though she knew she was risking hypothermia herself. Ranger curled around the man's feet, lying across his calves like a thermal blanket. Emily rubbed the man's chest with her bare hands, skin freezing and her belly cramped again, sharp and tight. Fear lanced through her. The baby twisted painfully. She murmured, "Hang on, sweetheart. Almost home. Almost home." Her voice cracked. She wasn't sure if she said it to the baby or the dying stranger. Snow built around them, piling up fast. She looked into the old man's face. He had a deep knife scar across his left jawline, healed but jagged like someone had slashed him decades ago. His nose was slightly crooked, likely broken multiple times. His eyelashes were white. His lips were blue. Emily whispered, "Stay awake. Please?" His eyelids fluttered. He opened his eyes. They were pale gray, washed out, but they carried history, heavy, brutal history. He whispered one word, "Jack." Emily froze. Jack. That name again. The old man rasped, "Jack saved me that night." Emily leaned closer, heart pounding like alarm bells. "You knew Jack Matson," she said. The old man swallowed painfully and nodded once. They threw him. Not accident. Emily felt sick. She wanted to ask more, but rescue sirens wailed nearby and the light of flashlights cut through the blizzard. Paramedics in bright neon safety jackets appeared, 3 of them faces wrapped in fleece goggles, fogging from breath bodies, moving with trained precision. The lead medic was a tall woman in her 40s named Mia Summers, strong shoulders, square jawline, and thick brown hair tied in a bun so tight it looked sculpted. She had dark eyes, fierce, direct a face carved by 20 years of night shifts. She took over immediately, sliding thermal blankets over the veteran. "You saved his life," Mia said briefly, voice low but reverent. He had maybe 20 minutes left. Emily nodded, half frozen. The old man looked at her again while they lifted him onto the stretcher. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength and repeated, "They threw him. Not accident. Men in suits." Then he passed out again. The medics loaded him into the ambulance and the doors slammed shut. Emily stood there shaking uncontrollably. Ranger pressed his forehead to Emily's thigh, anchoring her back inside reality again. She whispered through chattering teeth, "Ranger." What did we just step into? The storm howled like a choir of dead sailors. Emily went home barely alive. She peeled off wet clothes, collapsed onto her futon, wrapped in 3 blankets. Ranger lay against her side, keeping her warm through the night. She didn't sleep. She hallucinated memories she'd never lived. Men in suits with dead eyes. Jack's body falling through black water, Evelyn's scream across half a century. The baby twisting inside her as if it had witnessed everything. At dawn, the storm broke. Duluth was silent beneath a thick white sheet like someone had erased the world. Emily turned on the old radio she owned because the attic barely got internet when weather was violent. Static buzzed, then the local AM station's morning host spoke with strange tension. Breaking news. A 50-year-old cover-up is unraveling. Files connected to an unsolved disappearance in 1969 were anonymously leaked. Names of former city officials appear in documents. Citizens demand answers. Emily covered her mouth. Holy God! The story had already reached the airwaves. Then the broadcast continued. The host said, "We received a statement from a spokesperson of Harbor Safe Logistics, the company owned by ex-councilman Raymond F. Blackwood." Emily froze. That name was printed on the letterhead she had seen in the cabinet. The spokesperson said they were offering a substantial financial settlement to protect families from unnecessary distress and misinformation. Emily knew exactly what that meant: hush money. Pay silence. Buy the narrative. Later that afternoon, as she walked into Canal Park to get hot tea from a street vendor, a short woman in her 50s named Donna with warm brown skin, red knit beanie, and a motherly voice, she saw him. Standing across the street near the edge of the harbor, dressed in a navy wool coat again with expensive gloves, the same man who had tried to buy her silence at the nursing home. He didn't wave, didn't call out. He just looked at her with a faint smirk as if to say, "You're in over your head. Walk away." Emily wrapped a hand around her belly, holding her unborn child like a shield. Then she whispered to Ranger, "You hear that, kid? We're not for sale." Ranger let out a soft growl, not loud enough for others, but Emily felt her spine straighten. That man could buy television ads. He could buy lawyers. He could buy politicians. But he could not buy her soul. She carried life inside her. And life doesn't bend for corruption. Life births truth. Duluth woke slowly from the storm. Snowmelt dripped in thin silver rivulets down the gutters like the city was weeping out what it had been forced to hold in its throat for 50 years. Emily stood wrapped in a navy cardigan she had bought from a thrift store for $4, staring across the lake where ice cracked like glass under pressure. She was 7 months pregnant, her belly, a bright, undeniable symbol of future in a city haunted by its past. Ranger sat beside her, his thick black and tan coat shining with droplets, his ears forward and calm at last. He had become something of a minor Duluth celebrity these days. People recognized him from the story that was spreading like thaw water through every diner and harbor pub, the dog who led a pregnant woman to a truth the city had buried. A week had passed since the night she had saved the old veteran beneath the bridge. His name was Randall Mitchell, they learned. Randall, who had been a dock worker too once upon a time, had woken in the hospital, skin pink again, breathing deep, hands firm. Randall had a sharp Roman nose, white beard, thick brows still dark at the roots, eyes like storm clouds, but warmer now. He told investigators everything. Dates, names. He identified photographs provided by the State Historical Office. He spoke of Jack not as rumor but as brother-in-arms. He told them who paid off who, and that broke the door open. The DA district attorney announced a full inquiry. The DA was a woman named Carla Jensen. She was in her late 40s with short silver hair, cropped, elegant and sharp skin, olive-toned, tall and lean, in a pressed black pantsuit. She spoke like someone who had spent her entire life refusing to be intimidated. Carla was known statewide for prosecuting a timber company that poisoned water in Superior National Forest. People loved calling her the woman who made CEOs sweat. She held a press conference and said in her calm, steel voice, "We do not bury men in this city. We do not bury truth. Not anymore." Her jawline clenched on the last sentence like she was using her own bones to break a dam of silence. Carla insisted on meeting Emily privately 2 days later in a quiet conference room at the county building. Carla thanked her not with pomp, but quiet sincerity. Carla leaned forward, with her forearms on the table, no pen, no notes, just two human beings. She said, "You did more than any of us did in 50 years. You returned the moral spine of this place." Her eyes softened as they flicked to Emily's belly. "And you are carrying the next generation. They deserve clean legacy, not rotten memory." Emily nodded, fighting tears. Ranger lay on the floor at her feet, chin on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. Meanwhile, Ranger had been adopted by the entire harbor community. Gary Gruff, old Gary with the gray beard, officially printed a silly certificate using his printer in the bait shop that read Head of Security and Snacks. Gary handed it to Emily without a smile, but his eyes glimmered faintly. Gary even bought Ranger a new set of salt-proof dog boots, black rubber with reflective straps. Fridays became treat day. Ranger walked into the shop like he owned it, and Gary treated him like he did. Emily found a new job. Duluth Public Library offered her a part-time position curating a small section about harbor history. The head librarian, Miriam Caldwell woman in her 50s, curly red hair always pinned messily with pencils stuck in the bun freckles on her nose round tortoiseshell glasses, loved Emily's sharp memory and soft voice. Miriam had the excitable energy of a professor who never got jaded. She said, "People think libraries are quiet, but truth is, this is where revolutions begin. We keep record." Emily accepted the job and found comfort between shelves of archived tragedies and triumphs. The baby kicked more often these days. Emily sat near the lake and whispered to her stomach the name she had chosen. Jacqueline Eve. Jacqueline for Jack, Eve for Evelyn. Together for the sacrifice and the patience and the brutal, beautiful truth that love may fall, but legacy can stand. Emily imagined her daughter one day, tiny palm pressed to the bronze plaque by the lake, reading the names not as ghosts, but as anchors. Then the day came. The memorial ceremony. A crowd gathered near the lake. Men who once ignored that part of Duluth now stood in grief-lined silence. Elderly women who remembered the winter of 1969 held each other like the storms inside them finally had a path out. Local musicians played soft guitar. And at last the bronze plaque was unveiled in memory of Jack Matson, dock worker, protector, truth teller. There was a quote at the bottom, "Those who stand for others do not drown." Evelyn stood at the front, her hair like silver silk in the cold sun. The wind whipped the surface of the lake, and it suddenly made that low, long horn sound of a ship far out. Everyone shivered, not from cold, something older than weather. Evelyn pressed her pendant against the plaque and whispered, "I kept my promise, Jack." Emily felt something in her chest crack open softly like thawing ice releasing spring water. And in that moment, Emily felt for the first time since Adam left that her child would not enter a world ruled by abandonment. She gently rested her hand on her stomach. Ranger leaned against her leg-tail, slow, steady, proud. Love does not erase grief. It teaches the broken to walk forward, carrying both light and shadow. Ranger barked once loud and bright like a fanfare. People laughed. The mood lifted. A town unwound its shame and stitched something gentler in its place. Emily looked at the lake, then at Evelyn, then at her dog. The future was a thing she no longer feared. The future was thawing. In the end, A truth like this reminds us of something bigger than history, bigger than corruption, bigger than ice and winter and silence. It reminds us that no darkness, no matter how carefully buried, can outrun the light that God sends at the right moment. Sometimes that light comes as a whisper in the wind. Sometimes that light comes as a dog scratching under frozen ground. Sometimes that light comes as a single mother who had every reason to give up but did not. Miracles don't always show up as thunder or fire. Most miracles from God in this world look small when they begin a lost pendant, an old letter, a baby kicking inside a mother's belly. But God sees all time. He sees beginnings long before we do, and He uses ordinary people like Emily to break the chains that others forged. So if you are watching this right now, if you are tired, if you are scared, if you feel like life has cornered you, remember God is still writing in places you think are closed. He can take your broken chapter and turn it into testimony. Drop a comment below. Share this story with someone who needs reminding that winter eventually melts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, stories of ordinary people touched by extraordinary grace. May God protect you, guide you, and bless your nights with peace.